Greetings and welcome to Reading Candle Magic, Understanding Flame, Smoke, and Burn Behavior. This is part one in a two-part series. The second part of this series is called Reading Candle Magic, Understanding Wax, Symbols, and Final Outcomes. So let's get into the first half. When most people think about reading candle magic, they think about the wax left behind after the candle has finished burning. However, while the wax is incredibly important, it's only a small part of the story. A candle spell actually begins communicating the moment that it's lit. The flame communicates, the smoke communicates, the soot communicates, the speed at which it burns communicates, and the wax communicates throughout the entire process, not just at the end. That's why I always encourage people to either sit with their candle when possible or set up a phone and record it. Sometimes an important symbol appears halfway through the burn and then melts away. Sometimes the flame suddenly splits. Sometimes one side begins releasing large amounts of wax while the other side remains almost untouched. So if you're only looking at the final results, you may be missing out on very important pieces of information. Today, we're going to focus on how to read the candle while it's actively burning. Then in part two, we'll focus on reading the actual wax, including symbols, pools, buildup, direction, and the final outcome. The goal isn't even to memorize the meanings. The goal is to just learn how to read the story the candle is telling. First, let's start with setting an intention before you even light the candle. Before I ever light a candle, I decide exactly what the candle represents. This step is obviously incredibly important because it gives context to everything that follows. Sometimes the candle represents me, sometimes it represents another person, sometimes one side represents me while the other side represents somebody else. Sometimes I'll assign the left side to masculine energy or the right side to feminine energy. Sometimes one side represents the current situation and the other side is the desired outcome. There is not a single correct system. What matters is deciding beforehand so that when patterns begin emerging, you already have a framework for interpretation. So without intention, you're just looking at a wax and a flame. With intention, you're actually reading a conversation. So again, with this intention, you're also putting the energy into the spell of exactly what it is for, which is obviously another layer into understanding what is happening within the candle. So why exactly should you watch your candle or record it? Well, one of the biggest things I've learned from candle work is that the candle is consistently and constantly communicating. Many people light a candle, walk away, and then come back when it's finished. But some of the most important messages happen during the burn itself. Maybe the flame suddenly becomes extremely tall. Maybe smoke appears halfway through. Maybe you're using two candles and one flame is way bigger than the other one, or one flame even goes out. Maybe the wick splits. Maybe a symbol forms and then completely disappears. Maybe the wax starts to go one direction and then wax comes out the other side and then they form a giant pool, but you weren't watching, so you didn't know that originally a bunch of the wax was only coming out of one side. So these moments matter, and if possible, spending time observing your candle really helps you understand what's going on. If you can't sit with it, consider recording it so you can review the footage later. And remember, obviously, when we're doing candle magic like this, we're not really leaving the candle unattended, so just recording it from the other room is what I'm talking about. You want to make sure to pay attention to changes, pay attention to movement, pay attention to patterns that emerge throughout the burn. The final wax, again, is only one piece of the puzzle. One of my favorite parts of a candle spell is watching the flame height. Even more so, I think it really speaks to the energy behind what is going on. A tall flame is often associated with strong energy, momentum, intensity, activity, and movement. A strong flame can indicate that there's a lot of energy being directed towards the intention, right? A smaller flame may indicate slower movement, delays, resistance, caution, or simply a situation that requires some patience. Neither is automatically positive or negative, though, so please remember that. A huge flame does not automatically mean success. It could mean that somebody's, really quickly moving through something energetically. And a small flame doesn't actually mean failure. It could just mean slow and steady wins the race. So instead, ask yourself what the flame is communicating within the context of the situation. The interpretation will always come back to the story. Now let's talk about the movement of the flame, because the movement of the flame can tell us just as much as its height. A steady flame often suggests stability, focus, consistency, and clear energy. A dancing flame may indicate really active energy or emotional intensity, communication, outside influences, or just a lot of movement within the situation. A flickering flame can suggest shifting circumstances or fluctuating energy. Pay attention if the flame repeatedly leans to one side. The candle may be drawing your attention towards that area. You may also notice sudden surges where the flame grows much larger for a brief period. These moments often catch my attention because they can indicate energetic breakthroughs, heightened activity, or important shifts occurring within the working. So, again, context matters always. No single movement has one universal meaning. One of the most fascinating things I think that can happen during a candle burn is when the wick splits. Sometimes you'll see two flames. Occasionally, you'll even see three. Sometimes multiple burning points appear along the wick. When this happens, I begin asking questions. Are there multiple people involved? Multiple influences? Multiple outcomes? Multiple energies interacting with each other? The most important thing is not simply that the flame split. The important thing is what happens next. Do the flames move toward each other? Do they remain separate? Does one become dominant? Does one put itself out? Do they eventually merge back together? The interaction between the flames often provides more information than the split itself. This is another reason why observing or recording the candle is so valuable. Even more so when we are using two or more candles that are working together in a spell, especially in a cord cutting, which I have some videos on that. Watching how the flame moves across from one candle to the other, or how they continue to maybe split or burn afterwards, can be very telling. Moving on to reading smoke, this is something that doesn't typically happen a lot for me personally in my spells, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen often. Smoke can be another layer of communication during your candle work. It can appear briefly and disappear. It can continue throughout the burn. So make sure you pay attention when the smoke appears as well. Pay attention to how much smoke is present. Pay attention to whether the smoke changes throughout the ritual. If you have multiple candles, is it only coming from one candle and not the other? Many practitioners associate smoke with release, transformation, clearing, communication, or energetic movement. Personally, I think that those are all really great things happening within your spell. I also encourage you to avoid automatically assigning meaning. Instead, look at the smoke in relationship to everything else occurring within the candle. So what is the flame doing? What is the wax doing? What was happening in the ritual when the smoke appeared? The answer, again, is usually found within the larger story. Now, if you're working with glass encased candles, you may notice soot forming along the glass. Soot often gets interpreted as obstacles, resistance, energetic debris, negativity, or blockages that can be working through in the candle spell. So sometimes soot appears early and then it clears. Sometimes it remains the entire burn. Sometimes it only appears on one side, so take notice, and because the location and the timing matter. So imagine that it begins at the beginning and we have soot on the left side, and that represents a person, but then by the end, it's cleared and gone. So the energy that was around that person, imagine it coming off and then being transformed and transmuted and then disappearing. So rather than immediately deciding what the soot means, ask yourself how it fits in, again, I'm going to keep saying this, to the larger narrative unfolding within the candle. The soot is one clue among many. One of my personal favorite things that I just find very intriguing within candle spells is reading the burn speed. So I always pay attention to how quickly the candle burns. Does it burn super fast? If we're using two candles, is one burning way faster than the other one? Does it seem unusually slow? Does it change speed throughout the ritual? A fast burning candle can suggest acceleration, movement, rapid movement, or energy that is highly active. A slower burn may suggest delays, a need for patience, deeper processing, or circumstances that just require more time. Neither is automatically good or bad. Some situations genuinely need time to develop. Others are ready to move quickly. The burn speed may provide insight into that process. So, as I mentioned multiple times, one of the most important skills in candle reading is learning to step back and view everything all together. Don't focus on one sign. Don't focus on one symbol. Look at the entire experience. What was the flame doing? What was the smoke doing? Did the wick split? Was there soot? Did the burn speed change? How did the candle behave from beginning to end? And if you have two candles, how did they interact with each other? The answers often come again from the relationship between multiple signs rather than a single sign or happening within the spell. Candle divination is less about memorizing these definitions and more about just remembering and recognizing these patterns that we're talking about. In the next video, we're going to focus specifically on the wax itself. We'll talk about the direction of wax flow, which side melted first, wax buildup in pools, connected versus disconnected wax, the layers of the wax, flowers and petal formations, shapes and symbols, relationship dynamics within the wax, and then personal symbolism versus traditional symbolism. Because the wax often contains some of the richest and most detailed information within the entire candle reading process. But again, remember, the wax changes from beginning to end, which is why watching the spell and noticing the different things happening in the wax from the beginning to end can be very important. On an end note, just remember, the more candle work you do, the more you'll develop your own symbolic language. And as I say in all my teaching, intuition is one of the most important things. So as you're doing your candle spells, take photos, keep notes, record videos, track patterns. Pay attention to what consistently shows up in your own practice. Over time, you'll begin noticing that certain signs, formations, and behaviors repeatedly carry similar meanings for you. Most importantly, trust your intuition. The candle provides the signs, and your intuition helps you understand them. And remember, don't just read the flame. Don't just read the smoke. Don't just read the wax. Read the entire story from beginning to end. Thanks so much for being here. Make sure to share this with anybody that you think might like it. And don't forget to check out part 2, Reading Candle Wax, Understanding Wax, Symbols, and Final Outcomes.